Community Heart Media. Your voice, your heart, your opportunity. Welcome to tonight's show.
Well, hello everyone, and Mark is just sitting up in the studio, and welcome to Community Heart Media radio show again. Welcome, Mark.
Well, it's great to be here tonight on Community Radio, and sorry, just a quick little start there, but it's great to be here on a cold Wednesday night, and Naidoc week, of course. We've got the big Naidoc show tonight, which is going to be fantastic. Our special guest, AJ Williams, is going to join us. I must tell you the story about AJ, and I met him a few years ago with White Lion, and so it was really great catching up with him there, and looking forward to him coming on tonight. Very interesting guy, involved in a lot of things, so his input's going to be amazing. So how are you, Julio?
I'm well. I'm really good. Looking forward to the show. It's been a while since it's been online and in front of everybody, so it'll be an interesting program.
Great. Kelly, what's been happening?
What's been happening? Well, I am very much looking forward to the show tonight and for AJ to come on here. I think it's going to be a great show, and I think for all our listeners and viewers out there, we've got a lot of great shows coming up. So tune in, watch, comment. We're looking forward to having you on board.
It's great. Now, Julio, I was going to say, there's a big Naidoc march on in the city on Friday. It's a really great thing to go to. Unfortunately, I can't get there myself this year, but have you heard about it?
Yes, I have. Pretty much. I'm not sure if it's being run in what part of the city it's going to be running in. Probably we'll get more information from AJ and go from there.
Great. And AJ's here with us, so let's bring him into the studio, eh?
Yes.
Hi, guys.
Hi, AJ.
Hey, AJ.
Hi, sorry I was a little bit late. I was doing a late cultural awareness training for an organisation for Naidoc, and it just finished at 8 o'clock. So it's a part 1 and part 2, so I'll have to let them hanging until next week.
Love it.
Sounds good, mate. It's good to see you again, AJ.
Good to see you too. And hi, Kelly.
I'm hoping I'm not going to have internet problems tonight, but I might have. You never know with the internet out here at Northwest FM. It's Community Heart Media, our big Naidoc show, and our special guest, AJ Williams. It's fantastic to have you here, AJ. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, mate?
Yeah, my name's AJ Williams. My background's Wiradjuri and Wotjobulak. So my family are from Ndimbula, Horsham, Dubbo, Wellington area of New South Wales. I own my own company called Giraway Genya Consultancy. Giraway Genya is named after my 2 kids. I've got a son called Giraway, which is Wiradjuri, and a boy, and a little daughter called Ganya, meaning little echidna. And so when I named my business, I decided to name it after them. In summary, I'm a qualified nurse, youth worker, and a social worker. I predominantly, at the moment, work at a mental health first aid instructor I've just done a record of, today I just did a mental health first aid course before I did the cultural awareness course, and I think I've just trained my 8,153rd person.
Wow.
Yeah, and 770th course.
How do you keep track of those numbers, AJ? I'm curious.
Well, mental health first aid gave me a bit of a record because I kind of didn't know how many participants. I knew how many courses, but they were able to do the record.
Okay. Yeah.
So they gave it to me about 6 months ago, so I've been able to add since then. I do a lot of cultural awareness training, mental health training. I'm I do my own podcasts, and I do deadly thinking workshops for community, and that's all I can think of. I'm pretty hyped up.
Look, I want to do an acknowledgement of country, mate. I just want to welcome everyone. We're on Wiradjuri land, part of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And it's just great to have a show dedicated to Naidoc. We've got a few little challenges in the studio technical-wise tonight, but we're just going to keep powering on, mate, because there's a lot to talk about with Naidoc and what's happening with the Indigenous young people and what's happening out there in the world. I think a lot of people want to understand what Naidoc's all about, and I'm sure our listeners will want to ask some questions. So where are we going to start, mate? I do want to know more about yourself. So tell us a bit more about yourself, and then we'll get into Naidoc after that.
What do you want to ask me a question about me and I can answer it?
Well, tell us a bit about your background. You gave us a really good overview, but tell us about who AJ is and how you got to where you are.
Look, I got into nursing by accident. I didn't plan on doing it, being a nurse. I went for a job as an orderly at the hospital, and the matron at the hospital had one look at me and went, "Oh, I think you would make a great nurse," and they offered me to join the nursing program. So I did the last ever based hospital nursing training in New South Wales.
Oh, wow.
So I'm that old. People don't realise that I'm that old, but I kind of am. Worked as a nurse for about 6 years, but I got attacked by a client and fractured my spine. It's really hard to be a nurse and not be able to lift. So while I was nursing, though, I hadn't even finished I had just finished year 10, right? So after I did nursing, I went back to Swinburne University and I did year 12 at Swinburne Secondary College when I was about 23. And then I moved in and did my bachelor and my master of social work.
I knew.
I grew up knowing I was Aboriginal. I also grew up being fostered out after my mum through stolen generation issues. And I got adopted out and I did get reunited with my family as well as an adult. But I was 23 or 24 when I got reunited with my family. So I am so passionate about working with people with mental health. I had bulimia as a kid growing up. So I was in out of hospital. And that made my passion. I did nursing and social work to focus on working with young people with mental health issues, mainly anxiety and depression, but also I'm a cultural consultant for like the Butterfly Foundation that works with eating disorders, because I'm really passionate about helping young men. Because growing up, when I had an eating disorder, there was no material or anything that would relate to a young Aboriginal male. There wasn't anything actually related to males. I got a brochure in the hospital that my periods were going to stop and my breast development is going to be delayed and I'm going to get endometriosis, because that's the only brochures that they actually had that had that related to eating disorders. So and even now, 30 years later, we're still just moving away from those traditional case studies to be young women with anorexia to a whole range of eating disordered behaviour, if that makes sense. And I'm seeing it much more in a lot of young Aboriginal kids. And the other thing is I do mentoring programs at a number of schools, Scots College and Brighton Grammar and Woodley School, where I get to mentor the young Aboriginal kids and get them to experience a variety of Aboriginal programs and experiences that they wouldn't normally get. And I'd say that probably about 40% of the Aboriginal kids that I work with don't know much about culture or not connected to culture, where the other 60% are, which means that I get to explore things with them and they were just wanting to learn so much. Even if it's not from their culture, we can get experts to come in and share them aspects of their culture, and the kids just thrive on it.
I bet. Wow, you've got so much to unpack there, AJ. Where do we even begin? I can personally totally relate to that, professionalism into like when you're saying about eating disorders, where I worked, was trained as a dietitian myself, specialising in mental health and eating disorders. And I remember thinking, it's shocking, the amount of information that is not available to all cultures, to all, not just to all cultures, but like you said, to males as well. I remember seeing a number of clients there. So, wow, that's big.
So, AJ, you've got a broad range of experience with Indigenous people and Indigenous young people, and it's great what you're doing. Do you think we've advanced in terms of our understanding and working together with the Indigenous world and that, or do you think we're going backwards? Where do you think it lands at the moment?
Well, this is really hard, especially with the voice stuff coming up, because I know that I'm not going to tell people how to vote, but I will say this: if the vote is a no, what it's going to do is move reconciliation back a number of years. It's going to go backwards.
Can you unpack this a bit further for that, AJ, for all of our listeners and viewers?
To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure exactly what we're voting for. The voice in Parliament, yes, but we still don't know what the voice is going to look like 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of people look, I will probably be voting yes because I want to see some constitutional recognition and we want to see change actually happening. I'm stuck on the fence myself personally because I don't exactly know what this voice will actually look like, what will happen afterwards. But I've been working in the reconciliation space for the last 20-something years, trying to actually bridge some gaps. If the vote comes in as no, I'm seeing that all the work that I've kind of done going backwards, if that makes sense.
Can you just tell us about some of the work you have done in reconciliation? What's been your journey to where we've got to today that you think you're going to lose ground on?
Cultural awareness training in organisations about why Aboriginal people are behind in health, education, employment, the importance of getting organisations to understand why we have to ask that question, are you Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, especially in education, employment and health, because a lot of health workers don't know that. I do a lot of work with some of the nursing schools about teaching nurses about practical strategies of working with Aboriginal people. I work on a number of reconciliation action plans myself with organisations. I help organisations to develop and implement some of those reconciliation action plans. So we're trying to move everything forward in terms of reconciliation. If we have a no vote, that's like telling some people that we're not wanting to reconcile. But I can still understand the viewpoints of some of the people that are actually wanting to vote for no. I'm being the social worker part of me. I allow every person to have their own opinion, and I respect their opinion. I question those sometimes where some of the people that are going no and some of the reasons why they're actually giving me, because I'm going, some of the reasons aren't factual. Like, oh, we can't change the constitution. We know we can change the constitution, or that we've only got one flag. Well, we've got lots of flags in Australia. We don't just have one. And the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags have been flags for at least 35, or the Aboriginal flag since 1971 has been a recognised Aboriginal flag. Wait a second. If you're going to actually tell me no, I need a valid no response. But then I've started to hear some of that as well.
Now, what do you think is going to happen?
AJ, you do a lot of cultural training. You're doing a lot of different cultural training out there, and normally a cultural training session takes all day. Like it's a decent amount of stuff you've got to go through.
Yep.
But any chance you could give us your 3 to 5 minute version of your cultural training? Well, what would be a couple of the main points you want to get through when you start this cultural training?
I want people to realise how recent in history some of this stuff really is, that it isn't all just about colonisation and people today. Yes, we're affected by colonisation, but there's a lot of trauma that's actually occurred since then, and stuff that's actually happened in my lifetime and in the elders' lifetime. Trying to break some stereotypes that people have, like the last big referendum about Aboriginal people in 1967, I would say that 3/4 of the people that come to my courses that are professional workers don't even know what the 1967 referendum was about. They'll actually tell me it was about the right to vote. It had nothing to do with voting. It was about Aboriginal people being counted in the census, and should the federal government be able to legislate on behalf of Aboriginal people. So they're not even in the same understanding of what the history actually is. So my job is to kind of plot some of the historical points and recorrect it, but also get them to understand the impact that event has on people today. And that's what I see that schools are still struggling to do. For example, if I'm talking about the 1967 referendum to a Year 10 student who's born in 2007, they're going to look at my teacher and go, that's like 50 years ago. What's that got to do with me? And what's that got to do with Aboriginal people today? Well, the impact of that is that law occurred in the lifetime of our elders right now. And that's why some of the elders will share you the stories. When they start their story, they go, I didn't become a citizen of this country until I was like 7. They're telling you that before the 1967 referendum, they weren't counted as part of the Australian population. And people think that we were in the Fauna and Flora Act, and we were never in the Fauna and Flora Act. But that's another big stereotype that exists. But what we weren't counted in the census, but we were counted on stock books on missions and reserves, and we were treated as fauna and flora. That's exactly where that belief system comes from. But if I explain that that's occurred in the lifetime of our elders, I'm now trying to make that an impact of how that impacts on people today. The next generation down my age, you know, before 1967, Aboriginal people often weren't allowed to go to school and weren't often allowed to get jobs, and they're the elders in our community right now. The next generation down, the statistics are like there's 1 out of 5 that actually has a full-time job, 1 out of 5 that's been to a university, 4 out of 5 have not. It's my kids and my grandkids are the first ones that are starting to access some of these things that people think happened in their family 1 or 2 generations down. It's just the first that are actually occurring right now. I'm mentoring the boys at school that are the first kids in their whole family ever to get to year 12.
Wow.
So they come from communities where they are the first kid who's ever reached year 12 in their family. This is the first generation of Aboriginal kids that are often getting jobs and not relying on welfare as a social income. This is the first generation, and we're going back 10 years ago, first generation, that are starting to purchase their own homes before all the prices went up as well. So trying to get people to understand that sometimes if you're working with an Aboriginal family, you might be able to help them not just close the gap, or actually to help close some of the gaps that exist in that family unit, if that makes sense. And that's what my training is really about. And then providing practical strategies of knowing, if you know this history and you understand the current stats and facts, how can I engage with this Aboriginal family to help close some of those gaps and engage with this family? And I didn't just mean engage for the one time, because we know Aboriginal people, it takes a while for them to trust you. And it may take 3 or 4 visits to your service for them to actually be able to really trust you. I try to look at all those engagement skills that will help to engage that family, to keep them coming back. Because I say to all the workers that I work with, you might be the person that helps create the first within that family in 2023.
Thank you, AJ. That was such a good, like you said, quick summary for all of us, for myself included. I don't know how you feel, Mark and Julio, but for me, as a non-Australian, I come in from a very fresh perspective, you know, coming from New Zealand, where things are very different over there, very, very different. So thank you. Really, really appreciate it. What do you think, with that knowledge and with that summary, what do you think the voice is going to do? Do you think it's going to help to target any of those components you spoke about?
Okay. I've been keeping quite quiet about the voice. So, and that is because I still I'm not listening to every side. As I said, that I want to see change, but I want people to realise as well that we do not have a permanent voice in Parliament. So some of the comments I see is that you've got all these ministers that are in Parliament at the moment. Yes, we've got a voice there right at this second, but it's not a permanent voice. As soon as those senators move on, we lose that voice. This will be giving us a permanent voice, and I think that's a good thing. It is also giving us constitutional recognition, which is something completely different, if that makes sense. We've never had before. But I am kind of even struggling myself to go, I don't know what that looks like just yet. And I think that's what scares some of the no people as well. Like, what is it that I'm voting for? And if I do vote it, how's this going to change? But I also understand that people don't like change anyway. And it doesn't matter if we were saying that we wanted to become a monarchy, break away from the monarchy and become a republic. You're still going to get the division of yes and no's quite strong. And people that don't like change are always going to say no. I think we've got the same thing at the moment. If people don't know what it's going to look like, so the easiest thing to do is go no, because I'm scared of change. And we don't know what that change looks like, which scares people even more.
Yeah, it's a big subject, buddy. The yes or no for the voice. But look, I've been trying to encourage Kelly and Julio to go for the march on Friday. AJ, can you just tell us a bit about what the march is all about? And let's see if we can sign up Kelly and Julio to go on the march, mate, and other listeners if they want to go.
The march has been going, and it's really interesting because you'll hear afterwards different people, different news report, different news stories going, like they've had a protest going on down there. So sometimes it's referred to like as a protest, and other times it's like a march. We call it a march. It's something that's done that we're proud of, that we're trying to actually show the unity and to show Australia basically how proud we are as people. Yes, it does stop traffic for a little bit, but the media often pick it up and going, look, they're having a protest. And I want to break that stereotype that we're not there protesting. We're there as a march out of the pride that we do have as Aboriginal people. And the march has been going on for, I don't know, the last 50 years, maybe. It starts off down near Vars and goes all the way into Federation Square. It is something that's celebrated. I've gone to many of them. This year I'm not going, but I have been to some previously. I support it every year in other ways by broadcasting photos and stories from people who've actually been there to share their actual experience. But it is about the recognition and it was also the diversity of Aboriginal people in Victoria as well. And the ones that happen around Australia also show the diversity of Aboriginal people. So you will see Aboriginal people with a pride flag, you will see Aboriginal people in wheelchairs, you'll see Aboriginal people with disabilities. It's about celebrating all of Aboriginality, all of First Nations people, not just Aboriginal or Islanders as well, and Tiwi Islanders and other people that identify.
And it's such a good point, celebrating that diversity, AJ. What do you think, when you spoke about earlier about the gaps, and what really resonates with me is when you're saying about the first generation to get to year 12 or to purchase their own home when it's affordable. How do you think we're going to be able to bridge those gaps? What things do you think that we actually need to be doing? Myself, you, Julio, Mark?
Well, it won't be in my lifetime. And I think what they've said now, it's going to take the next 40 years to close some of those gaps.
Wow.
And I want the listeners to understand this as well, that if you're looking at our population data, 54% of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community is under the age of 25. So 54% of our population is under the age of 25. And I want to say that the majority of people under the age of 25, sometimes there's two generations of people there because Aboriginal people are still having kids quite early. So there's two generations of people in that 25. What we want to do in the next 40 years is get those 54% of the population to 65 and above. Because in our 65 and above population, non-Indigenous people make up nearly 20% of the population. We're struggling to make up 6% of our population. So parts of closing the gap are to make sure that we can move that 54% of the population into the 65 plus bracket, but with all the other gaps closed, with people living that long, for obviously life expectancy. We want to make sure that the kids aren't in child protection, because at the moment we have more kids in child protection and juvenile justice than ever before in Australia. We've got the highest rates right now, right across the whole country. They're not great stats to actually have.
No.
I think the report that I was working on the other day basically was saying that in 20 to 21, there was 178,000 Aboriginal kids in the child protection system and about 46,000 kids in out-of-home care.
Wow.
That's huge numbers. I'm just giving you approximate figures, but that's the numbers.
Yeah, AJ, it's just so good to have you on, mate, and you got so much great information. Julio, I think we really want to get some of our listeners asking some questions. We really want to hear from you. It's good that James has said hello to us. but we want to hear from others, and because people must have questions, because you've got so much information, mate, and I'm sure people have questions about the subject we're talking about tonight. And it's Naidoc week, so it's a great day to ask some questions about stuff. And look, mate, let's just get back to Naidoc week. What's the theme? What's Naidoc week about? What are we trying to do here?
Well, for me personally, I was asked. I had a little bit of a question sent to me before, but I actually just said, "What does Naidoc mean to me?" And I go, "It's a week of celebration. It's about understanding our history, our culture, and our achievements that we've done. But it's also about reflection. It's about where we've come from, where we are now, and where we want to go in the future. And this year is about our elders. So it's about recognizing the role of the elders that have been our past elders, that helped shape who we became today. It's about our current elders and their roles in community and family. And I don't want to say too much about the emerging elders just yet, because we're not celebrating them just yet, because we're celebrating the elders that are here right now. But there are people out there that are going to be elders in the future, and we want them to be recognised for the work that they're doing, because they're going to be our future elders. Our elders are not going to be here forever, so we've got to need to nurture the new generation of elders that are coming through as well, if that makes sense.
Look, I just want to ask Julio, sorry, Cal, I just want to ask Julio, you come from a different culture, Julio. Tell us a bit about elders in your culture, and what do you think about this promotion of elders through Naidoc week, mate?
Well, I'm pretty much Chilean, so we don't really have association with elders, but more with townships and the way the townships work. And that's a very old understanding back where I came from. The thing with elders here is I'm with elders. One thing I'd want people to understand, probably you can explain it better, is the position they hold in the Aboriginal community and how they associate with the young group of people. So could you give us a bit of a reference back to that, AJ, about how this works?
Oh, okay. There's how I would explain it in a little summary is that there's elders in communities, and they're elders appointed by the community, from the community, and they're able to hold, they're the knowledge keepers. They're the ones that are allowed to speak on behalf of the community. So I live on Wiradjuri land. The Wiradjuri elders are the elders that come from this particular land, that are guided by their elders that before them, to hold the knowledge, to be the knowledge keepers, but to also share that knowledge with the right people at the right times. Then there is elders in families, and an elder in the family is someone the family is appointed to talk on behalf of the family, if that makes sense. So there's community elders, there's family elders. So they're a little bit different, and you can be both, of course. And then there's respected uncles and aunties in communities that might be an elder, but they don't have any position in making huge decisions because they're the traditional elders role, if that makes sense.
Right.
I don't know if I explained that really well, but
yeah.
Very
And is the Aboriginal elders position, is that like more of a storytelling role where they pass on traditional values through storytelling?
I would say, yeah, it's part of their role. It's to make sure the stories continue. It's to make sure that language, if they know language, is taught. It's about holding the respect of the young people. And we are seeing today, like I want to say this about Melbourne in general. Melbourne has got one of the highest transient Aboriginal populations nearly anywhere in Australia, which means they're not the local people. They're people from all around Australia. And that's why it's so important to, where I'm living here in Baldwin Q, to acknowledge the Wurundjeri as the traditional custodians of the land. But the majority of Aboriginal people you meet will probably not be Wurundjeri people. There'll be people from all over the country. And if you're looking around Melbourne, Melbourne's got one of the highest, as I said, transient populations, but it's also got one of the highest capital cities that have got so many gathering places around it. And gathering places are established to help people reconnect to culture and to help people help find themselves and to experience community. And if we just go around the city, we've got like 7 or 8 or 9 gathering places, which is telling you there are a lot of lost souls that need to be reconnected as well, if that makes sense. And the elders that exist, some, and that's what I'm saying, some are traditional custodian elders, some are elders that are respected from the countries that they've come from, but are bringing their knowledge down here. But our kids at the moment are wanting to know so much about culture, and if they can't get their own culture because they've been disconnected, they're wanting to learn from the elders that are there, that are teaching them some sort of Aboriginal culture, even if it's not their own.
I was just going to ask you, AJ, then how do we bridge that gap between the elders and the youth who want to find out about that culture, and like you said, having those gathering places, but then having those transient elders, but then also the traditional custodians? What do you think that needs to happen?
Well, I think they're actually working. All the gathering places are working really well, I believe, and I get on with most of the gathering places. I don't want to say anything bad, so if anyone's listening, I'm not saying anything about gathering places. I think they're a great place for people to go to connect, to actually feel as part of a community. Because every time I walk into the gathering place, I feel part of their community. They're normally open to people. They also have a good understanding that not every Aboriginal person knows where they come from. And for a lot of Aboriginal people, that's hard, because we start our conversations not with, "Hi, my name's AJ," but it's, "Hey, where are you from? Who's your mob?" And we're asking people to identify kind of up front. And for some Aboriginal people, that's easy to say. They can go, "I'm Wiradjuri, I'm Yorta Yorta, I'm Gunditjmara." But for other people, there's no response because they don't know. And that's hard because I can't continue that conversation. And places like the gathering place allow people to acknowledge that not everybody does know where they come from, but also embraces people with allowing them to learn about the local culture, yes, but also about other people's culture as well, as much as they know.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, AJ, I could listen to you all night. We're in our second half hour, believe it or not. We've got another 20 minutes to go, but it's just so good having you on 98.9 Northwest FM, Community Heart Radio, Naidoc night. And we'd love to hear your comments. We're going to read Bree's comments in a minute, but we are going to get to our top 5 Naidoc points that you want to make, top 5 things you want to share tonight in our second half hour. I'm looking forward to that. And we got Bree Sullivan's asked a question. So knowledgeable and interesting. I'm learning so much listening tonight. So actually not a question, but a comment. But I think she reflects what I've just said, AJ. There's so much to think about. I suppose for me, my hearts go out, AJ, to the young kids, the young Indigenous kids that are locked up tonight. What insights can you give us to help us prevent that?
Oh, my God. That's a big question. I think there has to be... this is huge. I think we got to realise, I want to say that about 50% of the Aboriginal kids are not in out-of-home care, whether they're in custody, whether they're in child protection, but they're not living with their families. It's so important to be able to give kids a chance when they do come out of child protection, because often what the government does at 18 is lets them go, and they've not often not completed Year 12, and they struggle to find jobs. So it's about giving them that chance. It's also about allowing them not to be discriminated against when they sort out their own shit in their life. I don't know if I can say that on radio, but sort out their issues, because they often want to help family members as well that are struggling. And sometimes that, especially with the child protection system, is that the law is that if a child has to be removed from home, the first option is to go to family. But that becomes a huge barrier, because there's very few family that the government will actually approve. Because if you've been in juvenile justice settings or jail yourself, you're often ruled out, if that makes sense. So, and some kids in child protection have said the same thing, that, you know, the child protection workers will look at me going, "What sort of parenting skills did you have? How can you look after your sister's kids when you're in child protection yourself?" It's about giving people chances. And, you know, I want to plug one organisation, The Torch, if I can, that allows Aboriginal people to do paintings and creates the wonderful murals and wonderful artwork that prisoners can actually sell, but the money gets held by The Torch until they're released, and then they can actually access those funds. Which means giving people a chance, and we need to give our young people as much chances and as much, I want to say hand ups, not handouts. There's a big difference between a handout and a hand up. We're getting people, our kids often need a hand up to be at the same starting point as everybody else. And, you know, that some kids can shine. What I try to do and what I try to workers to do is sometimes to be a good leader isn't just to be out the front. A good leader is sometimes to be behind and push people along. Or myself as a leader sometimes of I set a stage for someone and my job is to turn the light on to them. I'm giving them that opportunity to have their voice heard or their stories told or their art. And I say art can be anything, music, dance, paintings, their own selves. I want them own selves to shine, if that makes sense.
So
I
yeah.
Opportunities.
Such a totally agree, AJ. You sort of spoke about earlier where so many of the elders, when you spoke about the age gap and many of the elders, you know, that not being past certain ages. What do you think's going on there? Is it the health? Is it the healthcare system? Is it the accessibility? Is it everything?
Look, it's really hard to pinpoint. If we knew exactly what the cause was, we'd be able to fix it. But we do know that a lot of Aboriginal people seek help for chronic conditions, and by the time they go to a hospital, they've been diagnosed with later stages because they'll turn up with something infected, sore, pussy, enlarged, and I need help right now. But there has to be barriers that prevent them from seeking help a lot earlier. Now, we talk about mental health, for example. I will say that mental health and Aboriginal people have higher rates of mental health, which is why Mental Health First Aid's got a whole Aboriginal mental health first aid course. It's why if you go to Beyond Blue, there's pages dedicated to Aboriginal mental health. Suicide rates, they're often triple the rate. We know that. It's then thinking, well, the early signs and symptoms of all those chronic conditions are the same signs and symptoms of high psychological distress, anxiety. Because anxiety affects every one of your body systems. It affects your cardiovascular system, which is why you get chest pain and heart palpitations. They're the same signs and symptoms as cardiovascular disease. You know, trouble with breathing and respiratory issues with anxiety. Same thing with respiratory conditions. So the signs and symptoms of anxiety and high psychological distress are often the same signs and symptoms of chronic illness. So when am I going to worry about it again? Yeah, when it becomes infected, sore, pussy, or enlarged, I need help right now. But also the racism or the previous experience people have with mainstream health services as well. If that, you know, hospitals were traditionally set up in towns. Aboriginal people moved out of town. There was a good chance if you're going to go to a hospital, you're going to go there to die. And to some people, that's still a huge belief system. You know, kids got taken from hospitals, from their parents. And the other thing too is that for me to access a health service or for me to talk to a doctor, nurse, or a social worker, I've got to tell them that I'm not coping. That's why I'm there. And if I tell them I'm not coping, will they see me not able to look after my kids and my grandkids? They're going to call child protection on me because all of them are mandated reporters as well. So there's a huge heap of barriers that prevent people from actually seeking that help a lot earlier. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's just
very, very much. And I guess to that's question A, I would say question B. How do we break those barriers then? Is it like when you said about, you know, those mental health stats, huge, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Or to not have to go at that end stage.
Yeah. Look, and that's why I think and I would say to people, go to as many cultural awareness trainings as you possibly do. I do some, but so many people. You're going to learn something different from every single person.
Very true.
get annoyed when people go, I went to cultural awareness once and I'm done it, and they tick it off like a box. Cultural awareness is about continually learning, and you're going to learn from as many cultural training facilitators. You're going to hear their own personal story, but you're also going to hear a different perspective as well. And Aboriginal people come with so many different perspectives. And that's why it's so important to listen to the perspectives. Our stories aren't always allowed to be told because we've never really been given platforms before in the last 10, 15 years to actually have our stories told. That's why the Naidoc theme from a few years ago was listen to our stories, because our stories are often being told from a white perspective, not from the Indigenous perspective, if that makes sense. And so now we're actually creating platforms for our stories to be told. And that's exactly why I set up my podcast, my Yarning Black podcast, because if you listen to the people that I've interviewed, I'm trying to show a whole diversity of what Aboriginal people look like in Victoria. So the
Tell
people
us more about those podcasts, AJ. I'm curious. Yarning Black, love it.
So, look, there's a number of different playlists there, but the latest playlist is playlist 17, which is Yarn and Black, and Black Yarn, and it is about talking to Aboriginal people that are quite diverse. So my first speaker, Ricky Spencer, who identifies as being a Aboriginal trans disabled woman, will talk a bit about struggling to get a job in education because of being Aboriginal and being trans and with a disability. But then I talked to Dion Whitfield, who is the first Aboriginal Scots College school captain that exists. I talked to Janali Jones, who is an Aboriginal lawyer and an author. I talked to Aboriginal dancers. I talked to Aboriginal actresses and actors and authors, just to show a whole variety of what Aboriginal people look like. And they've all got their own unique story, and they've got their own experience of what does Aboriginality mean to them. And I asked them questions. It's a bit like the questions you're asking to me, but what does reconciliation mean to you? What does an elder mean to you? How do you know how are you going to teach, Aboriginal stuff to your kids if you're part of the stolen generation yourself? And hearing the diversity of the stories out there. So that's the current series I've worked on. I've done an early series where I've interviewed 5 elders as my first series, and I've got another series coming out about elders as well. And I was lucky enough to be able to talk to the boys at the mentoring group from Scots College, Camberwell Grammar and Woodley School, who over a 2-year period I was able to interview them and their experiences of being an Aboriginal kid in 2020, 2021. And you can hear all their stories that have been recorded as well. And the interesting thing that when you ask them about questions of racism, discrimination and experiences and compare it to the elders, they're the same stories. So which tells you not a lot has changed in some areas. The racism and discrimination is still there, that they still get it. Most people, my skin colour, we get questioned on you can't possibly be Aboriginal, you being your skin colour. And there's the same kind of things the kids are saying today as some of the elders are saying.
Hey, I'll get Julio's got a question before we go to our top 5 in 5, but we'll put your links to your podcasts and everything on our page, because I think a lot of people are going to want to follow up this conversation because, mate, we've really been privileged to have your input tonight. Julio, what's the question you've got before we go to the top 5 tonight around Naidoc week and all the themes and the voice and the things that AJ wants to share with us tonight?
My question was basically just a simple understanding about how Aboriginals are treated in the sense of with accommodation, looking after their own homes, stuff like that. Because I remember doing a couple of projects while I was in the military in Western Australia where we were doing all the stuff for them and just watching them move into this place. Is that stopped? Like giving them more the idea to get the trade so they build their own homes, they do their own sort of setting up of their traditional values in their own communities? Or is it still too westernized?
I'm thinking, I'll answer it two ways. I think communities are trying to become more community focused, but it's not matching the education and employment sectors that are out there. We are still seeing that a lot of Aboriginal people are either going into business studies or going into health and community services studies. They're the ones we see the most. But we are seeing a lot more people going into apprenticeships. And the issue is that, like most people that live in rural or remote areas, when they get to the city, they get their qualification. How many of them actually really go back home to be able to implement that when they've set themselves up in a city or a country town where they've done their apprenticeship? That becomes a huge problem because some of the skills are not going back to the community, even though that might have been their intent when they studied. We're not always seeing that actually happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Great stuff. We go to the 5 in 5, mate. This is your top 5 points you want to share tonight. And we put them up on the screen. Julio takes them down. And we're just wanting to sort of summarise the night, I suppose, and summarise some of your Naidoc thoughts for the Naidoc show tonight, matey. So what would be your number one thought you want to share tonight?
I want people to really understand how recent in history Aboriginal history actually is, because then if you can understand how recent some of these issues are, you might be able to understand why the trauma is so real for people. So it's about the recency. My second point is about...
Just before we get on to that, mate, that's including the stolen generation stuff, isn't it? I mean, that's still pretty raw for a lot of people.
Yeah. Look, I'm registered as a stolen generation member myself, and I'm the year younger because my mum was told that I had died in care. If that made sense. So this is how recent in history this stuff really is. So we're not talking about hundreds of years ago. We're talking about even stuff after the 1967 referendum, things that still were happening in the 70s. Where there's still a huge belief system. If our kids are in care at the moment and not being connected to community, family and culture, they are the next generation of stolen gen. So there's different levels and different meanings in stolen generation. But yeah, how recent history this stuff is.
That is so recent. That is so recent.
Yeah. The next point too is about the role of our elders. It's about looking after them. It's about respecting them. And and I say this to Aboriginal people as well, now is the time to record their stories while they're still here. I hear so many people go, I wish I'd spoke to Nan more about this. I wish I had spoken. Now is the time to actually record their stories. The third one is that it is about reconciliation, and I want everybody to really take note about where you are in your own reconciliation journey, if that makes sense. Are you just at the beginning? When you don't know enough, because then you want to know more. How much can I continue to learn?
Just on that, that reconciliation story, I think a lot of people get a bit confused about it, and they probably, I saw a comment the other day is, what are we reconciling? I mean, I know it might be a bizarre question to ask, but I think we need to clarify everything as we go on the journey, because some people's reconciliation story might be might not even be on the journey yet, So what would you say to someone that says that to you? What are we reconciling?
Well, I'm actually saying, I don't mean you to reconcile with us. I want you to reconcile your own understanding of Aboriginal history. That's my first part. For you to be able, before anyone can reconcile with another group of people, I need to reconcile my own thoughts about what's my own understanding of Aboriginal history. How does it fit into my narrative? What have I been taught? What do I need to learn? What do I need to unlearn? What do I need to relearn? Am I just at the beginning of my journey? Or do I think that I know stuff, and then I really have conversations with Aboriginal people and realize I don't actually know? Because some people go, yeah, I'm culturally aware. I ask them simple questions. They go, I didn't know that. Well, I don't know if you were really culturally aware, but I've just made you more culturally alert. So it's really having a look where you sit on the cultural learning framework, if that makes sense.
I love that, Julio. I wouldn't mind making that one of our points is that reconciliation starts with you.
Yes,
starts
definitely.
With me. And I think that's a great point you make there, AJ, because everyone's thinking about it's out there, but it's actually in here.
Yeah.
Really agree. 100%.
Reconciliation action plans that are done by organisations, that's exactly what the organisation does. The reconciliation action plan is really about that organisation looking at them going, how do we actually reconcile and make ourselves culturally safe before we actually then talk to community and get a community involved in this? That's what the reconciliation plan is really about. The organisation making a pledge to go, this is what we want, this is our cultural capability of where we want to be in 2 years' time when the RAP needs to be renewed. It's about them looking at themselves first before looking at community. I reckon it works the same way. You've got to look at yourself first.
Yeah.
Really, really good point. Really good point.
I think that's number 4.
My 4th point is listen to our stories. Talk to Aboriginal people. You know, don't be scared to ask questions. Go on YouTube. There's so many elder stories. Go to the Healing Foundation. Go to my YouTube channel, another plug. You know, so you can actually hear Aboriginal people share their own stories. You'll learn something that way.
That's great.
And
Yep.
the last one is really understand what it means to be a true ally. And, you know, people say, I'm an ally, and they'll wear T-shirts with the Aboriginal flag on them. And I ask them, what does the flag mean? They go, I don't know. I go, well, why the hell are you wearing it? So, you know, people have on their email signatures, you know, we acknowledge the traditional owners and the 2 little flags there. And I go, well, what do the flags mean? I don't know. I go, so I'm not saying that it's a good starting point, but you have to be an ally is to also be able to stand up for us. It's about knowing some of the basic stuff and not doing tokenistic gestures without actually having real meaning. Know the difference between a welcome to country and an acknowledgement to country. And if you're going to do an acknowledgement to country, don't read it out. Actually say it from the heart, because that's what an ally does. They help move things forward. They don't speak on our behalf at times, and sometimes to be a good ally is to shut up and listen as well, and create those platforms for the voices to be heard, because it's not always have to be your voice that actually gets heard. They're my 5 tips.
Yeah, I love them, Kelly. They're good tips, aren't they?
So good. So good.
I especially love the last one, Kelly, about being an ally, you know, like and equipping yourself to be an ally. I
agree, because I'm the first to admit I really, really, really need to, I don't want to use the word upskill, but to keep, like you said, to keep on learning, to be that ally, and to know everything rather than just saying acknowledgement to country, to actually know the depth behind it, the detail, everything. Completely agree.
So, Julio, let's hear what the top 5 are again, mate.
Okay, we got number 1. Understand how recent issues are in history for Aboriginals. Number 2, the role of our elders. Number 3, it is about reconciliation and check your journey. Number 4, reconciliation starts with you. Number 5, listen to Aboriginal stories. And number 6, be a true ally.
I got 6 points out. Not 5.
Look,
that's that.
It's the top 5 became the top 6, which is great. And well, Kelly, it's been an amazing night. Hey, what sort of your reflections on tonight's Naidoc show?
I think it's been amazing to have you on, AJ. I agree with Bree's comment earlier. I have learned so much and want to keep learning. So thank you. It's been a very, very much an eye opener for me. Very much so.
And Julio?
No, thank you very much, AJ. I did learn a lot, and that's always good. I reckon knowledge is the best thing and the most powerful tool you can have. And thanks for coming on. And this actually, hopefully, our listeners get to be more inquisitive about what it means to be Aboriginal, what it means to be an ally, to reconcile. So I hope it opens up some eyes.
Yeah, and every Aboriginal person's on their own identity journey as well, and people need to realise that. And all the work that I do is not just for me, and I've been lucky to get recognised for some of the work that I do with some university awards and some community awards, but I've won those awards because of the work that I've done for community. And the interesting thing is they are community awards that I've won, if that makes sense. So it's the community recognising the work that I've done in the community. And that's what makes me so proud, and that's what allows me to continue to do the work that I do.
If there was one training you would recommend for any of our listeners or viewers to attend, what would it be, AJ?
I would say come to my cultural awareness training. That would be one to start off with. I also want, if you're a health professional and you want to work in Aboriginal people, the first thing is that you really need to do some Indigenous specific trauma-informed practice, because people say that they work with trauma-informed, but if you don't understand how the history is, you don't even know where the trauma is coming from. So how are you going to work in a trauma-informed approach if you don't actually know the history and where the trauma is coming from? So that's what I say to health professionals: learn more about the history. You'll learn more about where the trauma actually originates from.
Well, it's been great having you on 98.9 Northwest FM Community Heart Radio, AJ. And how are you going to spend the rest of Naidoc week, mate?
I am very busy, booked out with trainings. People are actually, believe it or not, organisations, their Naidoc event is to do a cultural awareness training session. So I've got one tomorrow and one on Friday. And on Saturday, I'm having a bit of a rest. And then Sunday, I'm off to do some work up in Rumballara, up in Shepparton. For Monday, I'm doing mental health first aid training.
Oh, wow.
And you go to the Naidoc dinner, mate. Are you going to the Naidoc dinner?
This is the first year I haven't gone to any. I go to them every year, and this year I'm just having a little bit of a break. But I am there in spirit with everybody.
Fantastic, mate. It's been so great having you on the show, buddy. Thanks for joining us on Naidoc Week. And we'll put all your links down so people can listen to your podcast, come to your cultural wearing training, and do everything else with you.
Cool. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Thanks,
AJ. See you, everyone.
everybody.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Tune in every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. or watch us on YouTube, Facebook, and follow us on LinkedIn and other social media.